Thanks to this institution here, thanks to the organizers of this week's debates on different campuses. And I think through these discussions, we've been enriching ourselves in our positions. And the debate now is on media and it's on the streets. Because Forage was invited to Fox News, no doubt. That's natural for him. And I was invited to NBC, no doubt. And so to say, the divide is profound. And I wonder if that is the purpose of democracy, if that is the purpose of debates. Maybe we're forgetting about the purpose and forgetting about the objective, which is getting nations moving, getting economies to perform in favor of those who most need opportunities. And maybe this divide that is ideological to begin with, and then it becomes pragmatic on the positions of the different sides, like the divide of poor and wealthy, the divide of illustrated and non-educated, the divide of those who have opportunities and those who have not. Or I would better say maybe the divide of the vanguard and the rear guard. And to me, the link, the narrowing of the gap between the vanguard, successful, illustrated, effective, and the rear guard, forgotten, poor, ignorant, cannot, should not increase the gap, because there will be only losers in this world. If that vanguard that is illustrated doesn't link to the rear guard, we will not have that ideal world we're all searching for. You can build the tallest wall that you can build, and yet, if the rear guard is not perceiving or receiving some of the fruits of education, the fruits of income, the fruits of being middle classes, we will have rebellions all over. Many times we don't see the profound problem we have on that divide. And maybe Tom Friedman, in his latest book, explained it under a different optic. The optic of countries in order and countries in disorder. And this divide mainly is provoked by, in the case of disorder, through climate change, desertification, where farmers have left their land and their home, trying to feed their family, moving somewhere else, that they could attain that, because at their own home and their own land, they're not getting it. Or all of those who are moving out because of violence, because of strong, profound difficulties in their own nations, in their own economies. Like it happens with those caravans that come to Mexico every year, and not in a caravan, they just flow into Mexico by the thousands, by the hundreds of thousands. Today, it's about 500,000 Central Americans that come through Mexico, looking refugee in Mexico, looking for better economic conditions for their families in Mexico. And once they cross, they try to reach this great nation, this great economy, this very attractive place to come as a refugee or as an economic seeker for better life, for them and their families. So the reasons are clear. And so humankind, decision makers, democracy, freedom, we've been trying to cope with this, that it used to be an asset of all nations, migration, and today is maybe the worst evil that can happen to you. Nations were constructed and became successful through migrations. This nation, just a very, very few, maybe not even 0.5%, are Native Americans. The rest of the 350 million are migrants or have a migrant heritage. And they came here to this promised land, to this great country of opportunities, looking for that. So there's a very strong reason behind migration. But today it has become a problem that now nobody seems to be willing to deal with. You just decide, building walls, making sure that you don't let them in, and that you send the army to the border to protect American citizens. And I joke, we Mexicans are chiquitos, but we are hot as a jalapeno. So don't play around with us, America. And this is the stand that finally President Peña took. The stand to say, Trump respect our dignity, Trump respect our sovereignty, Trump don't get into Mexican affairs. We know how to deal with Central Americans. We do have our own laws and we have our own ways to deal with them. And we always have that humane, that compassive ingredient in all of our public policies in relation to migration in Mexico, as many other nations have. I know the time has come when the overflow of migrants have surpassed capacities of nations to absorb them. So now we need to stop that or to put a limit to that. And that's the discussion today. I'm totally in favor of order in the borders, of security and safety in the borders. That's Mexico's constitution and policy. We respect profoundly that. We're proud to be a nation of democracy and a nation state, as 200 countries are nation states in this world. Nobody questions that. It's what happens in our constitutions and our laws. But that doesn't mean that you're on your own, that you build walls and you isolate from the rest of the world. On the contrary, the world has proven that by working together, you really advance much faster than you would by yourself. This is America again. This is the leader who showed us, who taught us to open our markets, to go the route of globalization, of course, with their own pragmatic American interests, to get returns out of participating in world markets. We were hesitant. We rejected at the beginning. We didn't want NAFTA because we thought we couldn't compete with U.S. farmers, that we couldn't compete with U.S. corporations, and that we would be defeated, and that we would be a loser on opening our markets and opening to trade. But things work different. In 25 years that we opened our markets, forced by U.S. corporations and U.S. governments, most everybody in the world accepted the challenge. And now the leader who had that philosophy, who taught us that that was the way to enrich our nations, to make our nations progress and our people improve income and jobs, then it withdraws. Today, the United States say, hey, I made a mistake. Let's stop it there. Let's go back. Let's build the wall. Let's provoke a trade war. Let's bring all of our corporations back to this country, to this economy, and let's enclose them in four walls. What's going to happen to this nation? What's going to happen to the world? if this great nation abandons its leadership and its responsibilities throughout the world. There you're in Afghanistan, there you were in Vietnam, there you are in Iran, you are most everywhere in the world with the idea of keeping the safety of the empire. And that's what we see from abroad. And now we all been offended. And in economy, every decision has consequences. Okay, he said, let's put tariffs on different products. What would you expect? A reaction of other nations imposing tariffs. And who is going to be the winner? Nobody. We're going to be even again with tariffs on both sides. The loser, consumers. The loser, citizens. The losers, those seeking for a job. The losers, income of people. So trade wars don't take you nowhere. I don't know who advised this man. I don't know if he went to school and learned about economy. I don't know if he just doesn't want to see the facts that trade is a win-win situation, that you both economies improve and grow through trading. Look at China. 300 million families are middle classes today in just 30 years. This country is taking 200 years and doesn't even have 300 million middle classes in its territory. That was through trading. And that's the way it works. You cannot change that. Now, on the other side, every decision has consequences. If he's being so lousy, imposing his will, offending Mexico, offending Mexicans, calling us criminals, calling us rapists, when Mexico's crime rate is only 18 crimes per each 100,000 inhabitants. 50 cities in this country have way above crime rates than what Mexico has. So we're no criminals and no rapists. And yet, to get his purpose of pressing, blackmailing Congress, instead of speaking openly and democratically, instead of using the force of democracy to convince Congress to give him $35 billion to build that wall, and the only wall is in his mind, because I don't think many people like walls and want walls, and everybody will agree that walls don't work. That walls are a waste of money and a waste of time. So now he says this caravan that he invented in his mind, coming through Mexico, he says, was the world's greatest, ripest festival in the world. How dare he says that about people? There was no rapism in that caravan. Maybe he would have been there, the rapist would have been there, then the party would have been great for him. So how can we accept that? That's why President Peña finally stood up and said, Trump, watch out. Take it easy. You must respect us. If you want to negotiate NAFTA, let's sit down and negotiate. But not by fear, not by your pressure. We're not going to negotiate under those conditions. And so Mexico now stands up. And so did China. They imposed tariffs. And so did Europe. And so does everybody. And yeah, somebody will say, yeah, everybody imposes tariffs. Everybody protects its markets. Well, that's why the world didn't work. When we created the WTO, when we started opening markets, we learned that what humankind learned thousands of years ago. The hunters, the gatherers learned to exchange, learned to trade, learned to exchange what they were good at for what the other had. And by the way, the price of products are determined because of what you value, the product that the other guy has. It's not the seller who establishes the price. step on his needs to get that. And later on, we have the creation of this nation, the independence of this nation, well done by Washington, as Bolivar did so in Latin America, as Padre Hidalgo took a horse and rode to get independent. And we all became independent, all this continent, in a couple of decades, all together. It's contagious to be independent. It's contagious to be free. It's contagious to become Democrats. So that's what happened. And what's the first economic decision that President Washington takes? Jefferson, you go to Europe, and other bright minds were sent to Europe to trade, to try to sell the products of this continent to the Europeans, and to bring in the products of the Europeans that they were doing so efficiently, so well. So that's trading started among free nations. And we discovered that it was great. And this country built its own global corporations and promoted globalization and said this is the way to go. And that's why we have the great world that we have today, the most successful peak that we have accomplished on these late years. It's incredible the way we have advanced. And it's incredible these last 3 decades how Africa's economies are growing 10%, 12%, how Africans are becoming middle classes, how China has 300 middle classes, how everybody has progressed. And it's because we've been working together. And we decided to create institutions, to create the United Nations. Now the guy doesn't believe in United Nations. This nation was the founder of United Nations and understood that we needed a world in harmony, that we needed a world in peace, and we created world institutions. We created the World Bank. We created all these great institutions. And now this new cast, these new thinkers, these new visionaries come and tell us we did wrong. We did wrong. Nothing is working well. Washington doesn't work. Wall Street doesn't work. The swamp and trade doesn't work. So they are inventing a new world for us through the exercise of power, through imposing ideas, and they don't let nobody think free. So the idea of democracy that we share, Farage and myself, is totally distorted. A lot of biases on the way we're executing or taking advantage of democracy. It's not working for us because some have become too authoritarian and they're imposing their own free will through executive orders. And that's what we have most everywhere around Latin America. Strong presidential system, strong authoritarian system, vertical decisions. And vertical decisions work well in businesses. Yes, they work well. The CEO instructs and the rest of the company and the associates follow. And this is what we have to change on Trump's mind. It's not the same thing to run a company, a corporation, to be a CEO, than to be a president. I went through that. It took me years to understand the difference. It's very easy as a businessman to say, you do it, or you're fired. That is not politics. That is not democracy. That's authoritarian thinking. In China, same. It's vertical instructions, and it works extremely well, that economy. They don't have democracy. People cannot participate, but they're very successful. So that's the choice that we have ahead. On the meantime, this guy better sit down and start talking to people, start a dialogue, start opening his mind to other people that don't think like him. It's terrible. The world is harmed. The world is building hate. We see the ugly American back again. We see the Tio Sam coming into our nations and saying, you have to do this or else. You have to stop that caravan or else. You have to accept, be defeated in NAFTA or DACAs will pay the price. That's not democracy. That's authoritarian rule. So I don't want to go back to the old days in Europe of that nationalism, that extreme nationalism. I'd rather go and look at the future, a bright future that we have ahead. The best things are going to happen to this world. This century is it. We're going to go much further than what we are today. No more hunger, no more poverty throughout this century. With extension of life will get up to 130 years for those who are going to be born on the second part of this century. That's going to be boring, 130 years here. But we will have time to do a lot of good things. We are full speed walking through a non-employment world. There's not going to be jobs. It's not the ones that Mexico are going to take away or China will take away. This nation better start preparing itself for a no-job world, a no-job United States. And there are things that we have to think about how we meet that threat, that challenge, how we overcome it. And there are many ideas now coming along on how are we going to work that out when the robots take away from us the decisions, when the robots take away from us the jobs, when the robots take the income, which I hope that we would not let them spend that income, that we will take it from them to pay for us that we created the robots. That's what we should be thinking about. Muchas gracias.